Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to Voices of Auntie Donna, where every story is felt as deeply as it is heard. Today, I have a very special story for you. A tale of love, loss, and the quiet courage of the heart. It's called The Birthday She Spent Alone. It is a story that will take you through the soft ache of grief, the beauty of memories that never fade, and the gentle rediscovery of hope in the most unexpected places. So, settle in, take a deep breath, and let your heart open as we journey together into the life of Margaret Hale on the birthday she never expected to spend alone. Pause slightly, letting the atmosphere sink in. Before we begin, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon too, so you never miss a story that touches your heart and soul. Your support helps these tales continue to live and be shared, and it allows me to bring you more stories that feel like warm embraces for your spirit. Now, let us begin. Episode 1. The morning she woke to silence. The morning light came softly, the way gentle things do when they know how fragile you've become. It crept through the lace curtains of Margaret Hale's farmhouse, spilling gold over the polished oak floor and the pale china teacup left half full on the bedside table. For a moment, the world seemed tender, quiet, unassuming, almost kind. But birthdays have a way of remembering you, even when you wish they wouldn't. Margaret was turning 62 that morning. The house around her, the one built with her husband Samuel's hands nearly 4 decades ago, was now too big, too clean, too silent. The only sounds were the sigh of the wind pressing against the window panes and the far-off coo of mourning doves. As if even they understood the solemnity of the day. Once, birthdays had meant laughter spilling from every corner of the house. The smell of fresh apple pie, the scratch of the old record player spinning songs from a simpler time. Her children, Anna and Matthew, had raced across these wooden floors barefoot, shouting surprises, while Samuel stood in the kitchen pretending not to notice the flour smudged across his shirt. That was long ago, when life was noisy in all the right ways. Now, Margaret sat at the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the teacup. The air carried that faint, empty chill that always comes after the fire of family has gone out. She wasn't sad exactly, just hollow, like a church after Sunday service. Samuel had been gone 5 years. The children, now scattered across states, called when they could. Anna in Chicago, Matthew somewhere out west. Both promised to visit soon, but soon had become a word that lost its meaning long ago. She rose slowly, feeling the quiet ache in her knees. 62 wasn't old, she reminded herself, but it wasn't young either. It was an age where mirrors spoke in half-truths, showing not what you were, but what time had chosen to leave behind. She dressed with care, though there was no one to see her. A soft blue dress, Samuel's favorite, hung loosely now. She pinned her silver hair up in the same twist she'd worn since her teaching days, and for a fleeting moment, she looked almost like herself again. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of lavender polish. On the counter, a small birthday cake sat waiting, one she'd baked herself the night before. Vanilla sponge with lemon icing, neat and simple. She'd placed a single candle on top, though she hadn't yet decided if she'd light it. It felt strange to bake a cake for yourself, but Margaret had learned that sometimes the act of doing, of tending, of caring, even for one's own sake, was enough to keep the soul from unraveling. She poured tea, steady hands betraying years of habit, and sat by the window that overlooked the garden. The vines that Samuel had planted still grew wild along the fence, stubborn and alive. Beyond them, the hills stretched in quiet greens and muted golds, the November light tender against their curves, and as she sipped her tea, something stirred. Not a sound, but a feeling, the soft pulse of memory. It was the same window where Samuel had once stood, his hands on her shoulders, whispering about the future, about the vineyard they'd never gotten around to building, the travels they'd planned but never took. "Someday," he'd said, his breath warm against her ear. "We'll go when the time feels right." But time, Margaret had learned, rarely asks permission. It simply takes. She closed her eyes. The warmth of the tea did little to soothe the chill in her chest. She thought of how Samuel used to bring her wildflowers on her birthday. Always the same kind, those tiny yellow buttercups that seemed too fragile to last but somehow did. He'd tuck them into her apron pocket when she wasn't looking, just to hear her laugh when she found them later. That laughter felt like a lifetime ago. Outside, a wind picked up. It rattled the window pane gently. A whisper, a reminder that the world was still turning even when her own felt paused. She rose, pulling her shawl around her shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch. The November sun was kind today, not too sharp, not too cold. In the distance, the old oak tree still stood, the one where she and Samuel had carved their initials in the summer of '48. The carving had faded, weathered by time and rain, but she knew it by heart. M+S. Enclosed in a crooked heart, she walked down the path toward it, her shoes crunching against the frosted grass. The smell of earth filled her lungs, familiar, grounding. She reached the tree and pressed her hand to the rough bark. It was cool, solid, unchanging, and for a moment she let herself speak aloud, her voice trembling but sincere. "I miss you, Sam," she whispered. The wind answered her, carrying the faintest scent of apple blossoms from the orchard beyond the hill, though it wasn't blossom season anymore. She almost smiled. It was strange how memory could bloom even in the cold. Margaret stayed there for a while, watching the clouds drift like old ships across the sky. Time felt slower here, like the world was breathing with her, not against her. And for the first time that morning, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like presence. When she returned to the house, a soft light had filled the kitchen, golden and forgiving. She sat down, struck a match, and lit the candle atop her little cake. "Happy birthday, Margaret," she said quietly. Her voice didn't tremble this time. She took a breath and closed her eyes, making a wish she didn't dare name, not for youth, not for company, but for peace. Just peace. And as the flame flickered, she could have sworn she felt it, a warmth brushing her cheek like the ghost of a kiss. Outside, the wind settled. Inside, the teacup still steamed. And for that single, sacred moment, she wasn't alone at all. Episode 2. The Letter in the Drawer. The candle burned low, its wax pooling into a small golden tear on the rim of the plate. Margaret sat watching it flicker, as though time itself had slowed to match the rhythm of her heartbeat. The room felt softer now, the kind of stillness that follows after a storm. Fragile, but somehow comforting. She finished her tea, rinsed the cup, and placed it carefully beside the sink. It was almost noon. The sunlight had shifted to a warmer hue, streaming through the lace curtains in delicate stripes, laying across the floorboards like the faded memory of a summer day. Margaret had promised herself that she would spend the day doing ordinary things. Nothing grand, nothing sentimental. She'd sweep the porch, prune the roses, maybe dust the bookshelf Samuel built for her 40 years ago. But grief is never polite enough to stay where you put it. It lingers, hiding in corners, waiting for the smallest gesture, a smell, a sound, a slant of light to pull it back to life. She went to the study to gather some old letters, the ones she'd been meaning to sort for months. The room was small but warm, lined with shelves that smelled of pine and paper. The old clock on the mantel ticked faithfully, its sound steady and familiar, like the heartbeat of the house itself. Samuel's desk stood near the window, exactly as it had since he left this world. She'd kept it that way, not out of denial, but devotion. His pipe still rested in the brass holder, his reading glasses folded neatly beside a stack of yellowed papers. Margaret reached for the duster, her hand brushing against the top drawer. It was slightly ajar, odd, since she was sure she'd closed it last week. She hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside, beneath a stack of old receipts and an envelope of seeds long dried, lay a sealed letter. Her name was written across the front in Samuel's unmistakable handwriting, bold yet careful, with that little flourish on the M he'd always done when he was trying to impress her. Her breath caught. For a moment, she simply stared at it, afraid to touch it, as though doing so might undo the fragile peace she'd made with his absence. Margaret, it read. Just her name. Nothing more. The paper had yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded, but the handwriting was as alive as memory itself. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, turning it over. The back was unmarked, sealed with the faint remnant of wax. It felt impossibly intimate, as if time had folded just enough to let him speak one more time. She sat down, the wooden chair creaking softly beneath her, and carefully broke the seal. The scent of old paper filled the air. That faint, earthy smell that always reminded her of his study, of nights spent by the fire while he read and she mended socks. She unfolded the letter slowly, her eyes tracing the familiar strokes of his pen. My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, it means the good Lord has seen fit to keep you here a while longer. Longer than me, I suppose. I know you'll scold me for leaving things unsaid, for always being the sort who kept his heart tucked behind duty and habit, but I wanted to say a few things. Just in case, you have been the light of my every morning. I never told you enough. How your laughter could change the shape of a day. How your patience taught me to be a better man. I imagine the house feels quiet now, but I hope it also feels safe, because you built that safety with your own 2 hands. Not I. There's a small box in the drawer beneath this one. Inside, you'll find something that's been waiting for you. You once told me you wished for a little cottage by the sea, where you could paint and listen to the waves. I could never give you that while I was here. Life had its turns and debts and delays. But I've done what I could to bring you closer to that dream. If the day ever comes when you feel too alone, too forgotten, promise me you'll open it. Let it lead you somewhere new. Let it remind you that love doesn't end. It just changes rooms. And happy birthday, my Maggie. I knew you'd find this one day, and if I know you, you're reading it on a quiet morning with tea in hand, pretending not to cry. Let yourself cry, my love. Tears are proof that the heart remembers. Yours, always and always, Samuel. Her hands shook as she read, the words swimming through her tears. She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes closed, feeling the weight of years collapse into a single heartbeat. He had written this for her, not in the urgency of sickness or fear, but in the calm wisdom of love that knew its time would one day end. When she finally found the strength to open the drawer beneath, her breath caught again. Inside was a small wooden box, smooth and dark, the kind Samuel used to carve in his workshop. She lifted it out gently, her heart pounding. The lid creaked as it opened. Inside, wrapped in a strip of linen, lay a silver key and a folded map. The map was old but clear, a stretch of coastline marked with a red X near the name Harper's Cove. Beneath it, a small note in the same familiar handwriting, "For the cottage that should have been ours." Margaret covered her mouth, a quiet sob escaping. She could almost hear his voice. Calm, teasing, always a touch of humor even when his eyes said otherwise. For the first time in years, she didn't feel old. She felt like the girl she'd once been, the one who'd fallen in love with a man who built dreams out of wood and hope. She ran her fingers over the key, the cool metal warming beneath her touch. It wasn't just a key, she realized. It was a path, one he had prepared long before she'd known she'd need it. The afternoon light was beginning to fade, painting the walls with soft amber. She looked out the window, past the hills, toward the horizon she could no longer see but suddenly longed for. Maybe she'd go. Maybe not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The thought startled her. That flicker of adventure she hadn't felt since youth. The idea of packing a small bag, taking the train, finding the cottage by the sea that Samuel had somehow arranged for her, it felt both impossible and inevitable. The silence in the room shifted again. It no longer felt empty. It felt like waiting. Margaret folded the letter, placed it back in its envelope, and held the box close to her chest. Outside, the first raindrops began to fall, gentle, rhythmic like a lullaby against the roof, and as the scent of rain filled the house, she whispered softly into the air, "Soon, my love. I'll find it soon." Episode 3. The Journey to Harper's Cove. The train station smelled of coal, damp wood, and the faint tang of salt carried in from the harbor. Margaret stood on the platform with her suitcase at her feet, the small wooden box clutched against her chest as if it contained the last piece of her heart. The early morning fog rolled in from the east, curling around the iron tracks like a ghostly ribbon, and she felt a strange exhilaration, that mix of fear and hope that comes only when stepping into the unknown. Her life in the farmhouse, the quiet rituals of tea and tending the garden, had cocooned her in safety for decades. But now, as the whistle of the approaching train echoed through the mist, she realized how restless she had grown, how the solitude she once feared now called her to adventure. Margaret climbed aboard, finding a window seat. She set the box gently. On her lap, the silver key glinting in the muted light. Outside, the world began to blur. Rolling hills, frost-kissed fields, the skeletal branches of November trees reaching like spindly fingers toward the pale sky. She drew a deep breath, tasting the crisp air, feeling the pulse of life beyond the quiet that had become her home. The map Samuel had left was folded inside the box. She unfolded it, tracing the coastline with her fingers, imagining the waves breaking against the cliffs, imagining the smell of salt in the air, the cry of gulls overhead. Her chest ached with longing, a bittersweet ache that was almost physical. She realized that all this time, she hadn't truly been alone. She had been carrying him with her, every memory a lighthouse guiding her through the fog of grief. The journey was long, hours stretching like threads of silk between stations. Margaret watched towns pass by, clusters of brick buildings, children running along narrow streets, the old clapboard houses with smoke curling from their chimneys. In each glimpse of life, she saw echoes of her own past. The laughter of Anna and Matthew as they played in the yard, Samuel's grin as he lifted her into his arms on a windy autumn day. She thought about birthdays, how they marked the passage of time, but also the accumulation of love and memory. She realized that this birthday, the one she had feared spending alone, was becoming the most significant of her life. It was not the absence of people that defined it, but the presence of what had truly mattered, what had endured. At one stop, a young mother with a baby smiled at her as Margaret helped the child settle against its carrier. The woman's smile was warm and unassuming, and for a moment Margaret felt a gentle tug of connection to the world. She was not invisible, not forgotten. She was simply in the midst of a transition, stepping from one chapter into another. By late afternoon, the train slowed as it approached a small coastal town, the mist lifting to reveal a rugged shoreline. Waves crashed against jagged rocks, sending plumes of white spray into the chill air. Margaret's heart quickened. She clutched the box tighter, the silver key seeming to pulse in her hand, as though alive and guiding her forward. She stepped off the train, the wind whipping her hair into loose curls around her face. Harper's Cove was quiet, almost untouched. A scattering of small cottages, a fishing pier stretching into the gray-green water, and the faint smell of seaweed and salt that made her chest ache with anticipation. It was beautiful and lonely, just as Samuel had known she would need it to be. Following the map, Margaret walked along the narrow cobblestone path that led to the farthest edge of the cove. The waves whispered at her feet, their rhythm like a heartbeat that she had forgotten she could feel. She came to a small, secluded cliff, where a narrow path led down to a hidden inlet. There, tucked among the rocks and wild grasses, was a cottage, modest but charming, its white paint weathered by wind and salt, windows catching the last golden rays of the dying sun. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. It was exactly as Samuel had imagined it, exactly as he had hoped she would find it. She approached slowly, the box pressed to her chest. Her fingers shook as she lifted the silver key and slid it into the lock. It turned easily, as if waiting only for her. Inside, the cottage smelled of cedar and sea air. Dust motes danced in the slant of sunlight streaming through the windows, and the gentle creak of the floorboards echoed like a song she had not heard in decades. Everything was empty, yes, but it was not lifeless. It was alive with possibility, a space waiting to be filled with her presence, her memories, her laughter. She set the box on the small wooden table in the center of the room and opened it fully. Inside, wrapped in linen, were small objects Samuel had gathered for her. A set of paints and brushes, a journal with a soft leather cover, a delicate scarf in her favorite shade of blue, and a letter addressed simply, "Maggie, this is the beginning. Let this be the place where you remember that life is not over, only different. Paint the days, write the nights, and remember, I am always with you, in the brush strokes, in the ink, in the sea breeze that will find its way to you. Love, Sam." Tears ran freely down Margaret's cheeks, and she laughed softly through them, a sound that felt foreign and yet deeply familiar. She had arrived not only at a destination, but at a threshold between who she had been and who she could still become. For the first time in years, she unpacked a small bag, laid out the journal, and touched the brushes to the paper. The cottage seemed to breathe with her, as if recognizing her presence, as if welcoming her to begin again. Outside, the waves crashed in steady cadence, carrying the sound of time and eternity, grief and hope, love that endures beyond absence. And Margaret, standing at the window with the silver key and the letters in her lap, finally felt the weight of sorrow lift just enough to allow a fragile, luminous thread of joy to weave through her heart. She realized then that birthdays, even the ones spent alone, could become a kind of rebirth. They could remind you of loss, yes, but also of resilience, memory, and the quiet courage it takes to step forward when the world has changed around you. Harper's Cove had become her sanctuary, her promise, her gift. And somewhere beyond sight, she felt Samuel's presence, soft and warm, a hand on her shoulder, a whisper in the wind. "Welcome home, my love." If you're still watching and enjoying this, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a quick comment. It helps a lot. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your support truly means the world and keeps us going strong. Now, let's continue. 4. The first winter in solitude. Winter came slowly to Harper's Cove, as though the season itself respected the fragile new beginnings Margaret had begun to taste. The mornings were crisp, frost etched along the edges of the windows like delicate lace, the sun rising pale and hesitant over the restless gray-green sea. She awoke each day to the soft lull of waves, their rhythmic pulse both soothing and insistent, reminding her that life continued, even when hearts were heavy. Margaret had settled into the cottage, making it her own with small touches that echoed her presence. The fireplace, once cold and neglected, now glowed each morning, a ribbon of warmth that spread into the corners of the room and into the deeper, quieter spaces of her heart. She had hung Samuel's old clock on the wall, letting its soft ticking become the rhythm of her new days. The paints and brushes he had left became her companions. Some mornings she would sit by the window and let her hand wander across the paper, trying to capture the gray light over the cliffs, the endless swirl of the waves, the wind threading through the grasses. The first strokes felt clumsy, tentative, but slowly they began to breathe, carrying with them fragments of memory and feelings she had not dared face before. Loneliness, she discovered, was not an enemy here. It was a teacher. It revealed the depths of grief she had carried, the quiet ache that had lodged itself in her chest since Samuel's death. The weight of birthdays passed without laughter, without touch. She allowed herself to feel each pang fully. And in doing so, she began to notice the spaces left behind. Spaces that could be filled with color, with reflection, with remembrance. Her days became a gentle rhythm. Mornings by the window with tea and paints, afternoons wandering along the cliffs or down to the quiet harbor where fishing boats bobbed silently, evenings by the fire, the journal open across her lap. She wrote letters to Samuel, sometimes words of longing, sometimes confessions of frustration at the solitude, sometimes lists of small joys she had rediscovered, the way the frost made the grass glitter like tiny stars, the scent of rain on salt-slick rocks, the softness of a cat she had taken in from the streets nearby. Yes, she had adopted a cat, a gray tabby she named Clementine, who seemed to appear out of the mist on one of her walks. Clementine became a constant companion, curling against her legs, sharing the warmth of the hearth, and reminding her that even in solitude, she was not entirely alone. Winter's storms roared with ferocity along the coast, pounding rain and wind against the cottage walls. One night, as she watched the waves crash in sheets of foam, Margaret realized she had not thought of the past as a source of pain in hours. She had remembered Samuel not with the sting of loss, but with the warmth of love that had defined her life. It was not forgetting. It was not moving on. It was something subtler, something more enduring, carrying him forward, not as a weight, but as a guide. One afternoon, a knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare in Harper's Cove, especially in winter. She opened it to find a small postman, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a parcel addressed to her in familiar handwriting. She accepted it quietly, her pulse quickening. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, were more letters, photographs Samuel had never given her, and a journal filled with his sketches of places he had hoped to take her. Scenes of sunlit beaches, forested hills, and small cottages like the one she now called home. She held the journal to her chest, tears sliding down her cheeks without shame. Even in death, Samuel had reached across the years to remind her that love endures, that care and thoughtfulness do not vanish when the hand that gives them is gone. Days blurred into weeks, and the rhythm of winter became a companion itself. Margaret began to understand that her birthday, spent alone in the farmhouse, had been a kind of prelude. It was a necessary solitude, a moment that allowed her to confront grief without distraction. Here, in Harper's Cove, she could explore the depths of herself, untangle the threads of longing, and discover the quiet courage that had always lived within her. She would walk along the cliffs at dawn, letting the wind whip her scarf against, her cheeks feeling the ache of loneliness transform into something almost sacred. She learned the names of the gulls that circled above the harbor, the subtle differences in tides, the shifting light across the cliffs as winter turned gradually toward spring. She began to paint the seasons, not as they were, but as she felt them, soft, lingering, full of memory and promise. And in those long, quiet evenings by the fire, Margaret realized something profound. Life does not demand constant company to be meaningful. Even in the most absolute solitude, one can find love, connection, and purpose in memory, in creation, in the enduring threads of the heart. On the eve of her 63rd birthday, she lit a candle in the small cottage window, just as she had done in the farmhouse a year ago. She wrote a note to Samuel, thanking him for this gift, this place, this journey, this reminder that even after loss, the heart can still expand, still feel, still hope. Outside, the sea roared its familiar song, waves colliding with cliffs and sending spray high into the night. Margaret felt the warmth of the fire inside her chest, the weight of grief lightened by purpose and memory. She watched the candle flicker, imagining that somewhere beyond sight, Samuel's smile shimmered through the mist. It was a winter of quiet, yes, but it was also a winter of awakening, a season that revealed the resilience she had always carried but never fully known. And when the first snow fell, dusting the cliffs and the cottage in white, she felt not the sting of loneliness, but the luminous hush of presence, the certainty that even in loss, love remains. Margaret closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of cedar, salt, and frost, letting the world settle around her. She had found a new rhythm, a new life. Her heart, once hollowed by absence, was filling again, slowly, gently, inexorably, with memory, hope, and the quiet joy of being alive. 5. The birthday that marked a new beginning, the dawn of Margaret's 63rd birthday, arrived with a softness she had not expected. The sky over Harper's Cove was a delicate watercolor of pinks and golds, the light spilling gently over cliffs and waves, painting everything with a quiet reverence. She rose from her bed, feeling the warm embrace of the cottage walls, the faint scent of cedar and sea salt lingering like an old lullaby. For a moment, she paused by the window, gazing out at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. It was breathtaking, endless, a reminder that life, even in its loneliness, could hold beauty beyond imagination. She thought of the birthdays she had once dreaded, the ones spent in silence, in longing, in rooms too empty to hold memory. And now, standing here in the place Samuel had prepared for her, she understood. She had not been alone, not truly. She had always carried love, and it had led her here. Margaret dressed carefully in a soft wool coat, the color of storm clouds touched by dawn, and wrapped a scarf around her neck. Clementine, the gray tabby who had become her steadfast companion, leapt onto the windowsill to watch her with knowing eyes. Together, they walked along the cliffside path, the cold air brushing her cheeks, the waves below singing their eternal song. She carried the wooden box with her, placing it gently on a sunlit rock where the ocean breeze could dance over it. Today, she would open the gifts Samuel had left in the journal. The letters, the sketches, the tokens of a life lived fully. The traces of a love that had endured beyond time and grief. As she unfolded the first letter, she noticed a subtle shift in herself. She no longer trembled with longing. Her heart was steady. There was sorrow, yes, a deep, abiding ache. But it was accompanied by clarity, by gratitude, by a luminous sense of connection that transcended absence. The words on the paper seemed to breathe alongside her, gentle reminders that love had never abandoned her, that Samuel's presence remained woven into the very fabric of her being. Margaret spent the morning reading, painting, and reflecting, letting the waves below guide her thoughts. The brush strokes on her canvas captured the light over the cliffs, the rhythm of the water, the tender hush of the morning. Each movement was an act of remembrance and celebration, a way to honor both the life she had lived and the one she was still creating. By midday, the sun had climbed higher, and a quiet warmth filled the cottage. Margaret stepped outside, carrying her work and letters to the little garden she had begun planting near the cliffs. She knelt in the soil, feeling the earth between her fingers, the frost of winter giving way to early hints of spring. Each seed she planted, each small flower she nurtured, became a symbol of endurance, of patience, of life returning to the spaces grief had hollowed. As she worked, the sound of laughter reached her ears. She looked up to see a few local fishermen children daring each other along the rocks near the pier. Their joy was unself-conscious, pure, and it made her heart swell with a quiet warmth. She waved to them, and one of the girls ran forward, offering her a small seashell with the words, "Happy birthday!" Margaret accepted it with a smile, realizing that even in a place so solitary, life had a way of weaving connection in subtle, miraculous ways. Returning to the cottage, she placed the seashell beside the wooden box, beside the letters and brushes, beside Clementine, who purred softly at her feet. Margaret sank into a chair by the window, letting sunlight fall across her face, and felt a profound sense of completeness. She had endured loneliness, grief, and the quiet ache of lost time, and yet here she was, alive, present, filled with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. She closed her eyes and imagined Samuel beside her, as he had been that first morning in the farmhouse, warm and steady, whispering love into the quiet spaces. She could almost hear his laughter in the waves, feel the brush of his hand in the wind. And instead of pain, she felt gratitude for the years they had shared, for the memories that still lingered, for the courage to embrace life again. Margaret's birthday, once a symbol of isolation and sorrow, had transformed into something sacred, a testament to endurance, to love, to the quiet but unyielding strength of the human heart. She realized that birthdays were not merely markers of time. They were milestones of resilience, opportunities to honor the past while stepping boldly into the future. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the cliffs in gold and rose, Margaret stepped onto the porch with Clementine at her heels. She looked out over the cove, the waves sparkling like scattered diamonds in the dying light, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Samuel," she said softly, her voice carried away by the wind. "For this life, for this love, for guiding me here." The cottage seemed to sigh in response, the wind rustling through the grasses, the ocean calling softly, endlessly. And in that moment, Margaret knew she was not alone, not in the way she had feared, not ever again. She turned back toward the warm glow of the cottage, carrying the wooden box, the letters, and her paints. Clementine brushed against her legs, and for the first time in years, Margaret laughed freely, a sound full of hope, full of memory, full of the enduring, unspoken love that had carried her through every winter, every silence, every lonely birthday. And as night fell over Harper's Cove, the candle in the window flickered gently, a beacon to the world, that even in loss there is light, even in solitude there is life. Even in endings, there is a beginning. Margaret Hale had spent a birthday alone, yes, but she had emerged on the other side, not empty, not forgotten, but full of love, memory, and the quiet, unstoppable courage to live again. As Margaret's journey comes to an unexpected turning point, the winds of Harper's Cove carry secrets she never imagined, and a discovery that could change everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and the life she's yet to live. Will she find the courage to open the next door, or will the shadows of the past keep her from the future she deserves? Stay with us, because the story doesn't end here, and what happens next may touch your heart in ways you never expected. If this tale moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that will linger in your soul long after the screen goes dark.